And good morning to all of you. I hope we'll have a lively discussion soon. But before that, let me try to answer some of the questions, Svante. And of course, being a woman asked to address the topic of gender equality, it actually tends to push oneself into the personal domain. And it's hard to avoid to share some of my own experiences with you. So I promise to share some of those with you, but I'll come back also and move beyond the personal level to say something about progress and challenges in my own organization, MSB, and also in the Swedish system for civil contingency management. So what about myself and my experiences? When I look upon my career, I can at first hand see that I have almost always been working in areas that are traditionally dominated with men. It started off with choosing the law career and being a student at the Stockholm University. We were not as many women in the law division then that compared to now. I moved into the judge career, working quite a few years in that male-dominated profession. At least that was early 90s, late 80s and early 90s. And I've also worked in the field of intelligence within the Swedish security police and also in other areas. And that is really a male bastion. So during those years, what I did experience was quite a fair amount, I would say, of male jargon. And I also witnessed some very powerful male networks. And when I thought about it, did I have any experiences of being treated in an unequal way? Or was my career affected being that male-dominated bastion? Well, no. I couldn't really say that. On the contrary, it might even have been to my advantage to be a woman, easier to spot than the gray or dark-suited men. So actually, I must disappoint you in that regard. But something that I did experience rather early in my professional work was when I was deputy head at one of the units in our Ministry of Justice, working with police matters. And this is in the mid-90s. So what I saw there was the power of regulation tackling gender inequalities. I'm not really a big fan of quotas for women in general or setting up hard rules and regulations on quoting in women in different positions. But I did see that there is some power, at least, in setting out goals and having them imposed on in this case, our police agencies in Sweden. So what happened in this case was that there was a decision taken by the Swedish government to set a goal to increase the number of female police officers. Quantified goals, very precise, that were communicated through the yearly letters of appropriation from government to the police services. And actually, this had quite an impact. I would say even an immediate impact. And I don't think we would have seen that increase in female police officers that we saw. I think the level today is around 28%, and it was very, very low at that time, I think, not even 10%. So it has worked. So there is some regulatory push there that can be used very efficiently. If I turn to my current line of business now in Sweden, the Swedish civil contingency management, and not only the agency, I would say that the picture is quite mixed. When it comes to gender equality. There are still areas where there is an obvious gender imbalance in the fire and rescue services, I would say, for instance, and I'll talk more about that in a while. But overall, I think that there is an increasing awareness, and that's good. At MSB, in my agency, we've been working systematically with gender equality right from the start. We have a gender equality plan, like most Swedish government agencies. But you all know that the fact that there is a plan is, of course, no guarantee for any meaningful action. What we try to do is to really fill that plan with content. And one of the things we focus on is training and awareness-raising activities related to our daily work. We try to analyze what we actually do in a systematic and structured way. And, well, we are asking ourselves some relevant questions. Are we giving women and men the same access to leadership courses? Are we asking women and men the same questions when it comes to career planning, etc.? MSB is also one of the 18 government agencies that have been asked to take part in a project on gender mainstreaming. And that project started this year and will run until the end of next year. The idea here is to gather good examples and best practices that can be shared with others. And the focus here is not as much on gender equality at the workplace, but more on how the agency is mainstreaming gender into all its external activities and operations. Are we, for example, considering the needs of both men and women when we inform the public about risks and emergencies? Or when we design our exercises and training programs? Or when we are financing research? I sincerely hope we do, or that we are doing all this, but I'm sure that we'll discover a lot of new things as part of this project. One of the areas where I know there's great room for improvement is in the fire and rescue services. The rescue services are organized at the local level in Sweden. It's the area of responsibility for our 290 municipalities, which in the Swedish constitutional system makes it quite difficult for the Swedish government to impose any regulatory push on them and to have change coming from above. Just to give you a few numbers and statistics, at MSB, we have 47% women and 53% men employed. And I'm quite proud to say that 50% of our heads of division are women, or 50% are men. But if we look at the percentage of full-time employed women in the rescue services, we find only 3%. And it's in the operational part of the rescue services. If we add part-time personnel, we'd have an increase up to 4.6% being women. So it's a large male dominance there. Something which, of course, influences the whole professional culture, norms, standards, values, etc. And this is a problem that we've been aware about for quite a long time, and that MSB has dealt with, or tried to deal with. And some progress has been made, but actually it's still a long journey ahead of us. And one of the problems we find here is the strength of traditional male archetypes. The idea of the brave and strong and potent fireman ready to sacrifice his life and save the vulnerable women and children. And this archetype seems hard to combine with a modern idea of a fireman or woman using smart techniques and equipment rather than physical strength to deal with their job. And what is very interesting, or maybe you could say kind of depressing, is also that these traditional archetypes are not only devastating from a female gender perspective, they are almost equally detrimental for the men, who feel an enormous pressure to live up to this macho image. So this is an area where I think we really need to share good examples in an international perspective, like I hope we will be doing here today. I have not seen much in terms of international working groups addressing this issue, so I was glad to hear about one group which started last year called Women in Fire and Rescue Services, which is organized within the framework of the International Association of Fire and Rescue Services. MSB has a representative there, and there are 7 countries taking part in this group, which actually started as a Russian initiative. In Russia, women are not allowed to take part in firefighting missions, although they can become members of a fire brigade. And I think the situation is quite similar in many other European countries. In Austria, for example, it was only in the 90s that women were allowed to become firefighters. And now they have around 4% of female firefighters, the same percentage as we have in Sweden. From what I understand, the situation is a little bit brighter in countries like Germany and France. In France, they have about 13% female firefighters, and in Germany, about 10%. But it's very positive and promising that in Germany, about 25% in the youth fire brigades are girls. So maybe there's some hope for the next generation. There is clearly a lot to gain from these international comparisons. They give you new perspectives, don't they? And at a general level, if I speak about MSB, I think we have been more successful in our agency at developing our equality work within our international missions, compared to what we have been achieving at the local or national level. I think one of the reasons here is the impact of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which has been a very, very powerful vehicle for action. We have a national action plan based on 1325, which is quite executive with indicators, measuring our achievements. And we have also developed a number of other practical tools based on 1325, like gender training for field staff, a code of conduct, which of course includes non-discrimination, and also a gender equality handbook that I can very warmly recommend to you. You can download it from our webpage, msb.se. It includes many interesting examples from the field. And what is fantastic is that all the good work actually seems to pay off in the sense that we do see very good results within the projects that we are involved with or in internationally. Just to give you a few examples, when we were in Pakistan in 2010 during the flooding there to help with water cleaning, our teams decided to carry out a simple survey before they started installing the new water cleaning plants. And what came out was very clearly that women and men had different needs and looked upon things differently. Actually, for the unmarried, for the single women, it was a very dangerous task to collect water. So they were keen to have the plants located close to the village and in open spaces with light. And these needs became our overriding concern in building the plants. Another example is from a demining mission in Sudan, where there was a lot of initial skepticism from the local men about employing women as deminers. One of the issues, of course, concerned clothing. The female deminers had to wear respectable clothes. You can imagine what that means, which, of course, full cover. And after some inquiries from the local, from our project manager, the problems could be solved, and the women could actually complete their training course for driving. They were going to drive the demining vehicles, and of course that was a success. For some of them, it actually meant that they could find a new way of setting up enterprises, small businesses, and actually help themselves out of poverty also. So these examples that I mentioned, they are very hands-on, very practical, gender work in the field, so to say. But in many of our missions, we also work closely with national disaster management agencies to look at more policy-focused issues. One example is in Mozambique, where we have been providing support for risk mapping and looked how climate change and extreme weather can impact regions, as well as differences in impact for women and children compared to men. How do you alert? How do you alert men? How do you alert women, children? One lessons learned. And actually, I visited Mozambique a few years ago, and I remember thinking that a lot of the work that we were doing there and the lessons we can draw from them is something we really could share and implement back home, which of course might seem a bit paradoxical. We seem to be exporting something that we are actually not really able to fully implement at home in our national systems.